America just witnessed another execution. Florida had already carried out 8 executions this year alone. The latest name added to this grim tally, Michael Bernard Bell.
State of Florida execute Duval County inmate Michael Bernard Bell. Bell was sentenced to death for shooting and killing 2 people outside of a Moncrief bar. Prosecutors called it a revenge killing.
We shall explore all about Michael Bernard Bell's journey to the execution chamber, which began with a single act of self-defense in 1993 that claimed 2 innocent lives. This is the tale of how his obsession with vengeance destroyed multiple families, and why 2025 has become the year America embraced execution like never before. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back to where it all began. A hot summer day in Jacksonville, when a single gunshot set in motion a chain of events that ended with Bell strapped to a gurney 32 years later. June 1993. Jacksonville, Florida. The summer heat was oppressive, but nothing compared to the anger that consumed Michael Bernard Bell's soul. Theodore Wright never intended to become a killer that day. When Bell's brother confronted him, Wright was simply defending himself. The confrontation was brief, violent, and decisive. Bell's brother lay dead, and Wright walked away legally justified in his actions. The courts would later confirm what everyone already knew: this was textbook self-defense. But Michael Bell saw something entirely different. Where the law saw justified homicide, Bell saw murder. Where society saw closure, Bell saw the beginning of his mission. The transformation was immediate and terrifying. Friends and family watched as grief twisted into something far more dangerous. Bell didn't mourn his brother's death. He weaponized it. "Wright belongs in the morgue," Bell declared, his voice carrying the cold certainty of a man who had already made his decision. These weren't the desperate words of a grieving brother spoken in a moment of pain. They were a promise, repeated daily like a mantra of death. What followed wasn't healing, it was preparation for war. Most people process grief in stages: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. Michael Bell got stuck on anger and turned it into an art form. From June through December 1993, Bell's life became consumed by a single purpose: the systematic planning of Theodore Wright's murder. Bell studied Wright like a predator stalking prey. He learned Wright's routines, his hangouts, his habits. He mapped out potential locations for the kill. He considered weapons, timing, escape routes. Every conversation Bell had seemed to circle back to his plans for Wright. Friends became unwilling accomplices to his obsession. Family members grew tired of his constant threats. But Bell didn't care about their discomfort. He cared about perfecting his plan. The most chilling aspect wasn't Bell's determination to kill Wright. It was his complete lack of concern for collateral damage. Bell made it clear that anyone who got in his way would become a casualty of his war against Wright. December 9, 1993. The temperature had dropped, but Bell's blood ran hot with anticipation. After 6 months of planning, he finally spotted his target. There it was. Theodore Wright's distinctive yellow Plymouth Fury, parked outside a Jacksonville bar like a gift from the gods of vengeance. Bell's heart must have raced as he realized his moment had finally arrived. But fate had already played its cruelest trick. Wright had sold the car weeks earlier to his half-brother Jimmy West. The 23-year-old had no connection to Bell's brother's death, no knowledge of the vendetta brewing in Bell's mind, no idea he was about to become the victim of a case of mistaken identity that would cost him everything. Inside the bar, West was enjoying what should have been an ordinary night out. Beside him sat 18-year-old Tameka Smith, a teenager whose biggest worry should have been her next exam or weekend plans. They laughed, talked, and lived in the blissful ignorance of people who had no enemies and no reason to fear the darkness outside. Bell watched from the shadows, his AK-47 assault rifle ready for war. When he saw the group approaching the yellow Plymouth, he knew his time had come. The ski mask went on, the safety came off, and Michael Bell prepared to become a mass murderer. As Jimmy West, Tameka Smith, and their friend approached the car, Bell emerged from his hiding spot like death incarnate. The AK-47 in his hands wasn't chosen randomly. It was a weapon designed for maximum carnage, capable of firing dozens of rounds in seconds. Bell opened fire without warning, without mercy, without hesitation. The assault rifle's distinctive sound shattered the night as bullets tore through flesh and metal alike. West and Smith never had a chance to run, to hide, to even understand what was happening to them. But Bell's bloodlust didn't end with his primary targets. He continued firing at anyone within range, turning the parking lot into a war zone. Bullets riddled the front of the bar, shattering windows and sending terrified patrons diving for cover. Other innocent bystanders became targets in Bell's indiscriminate spray of death. Here's what makes this crime even more horrifying. Bell knew exactly who he was killing. Court records reveal that Bell recognized Jimmy West as Theodore Wright's brother before he pulled the trigger. This wasn't a case of mistaken identity. It was a deliberate decision to murder an innocent man because of his family connection to Bell's real target. In Bell's twisted logic, killing Wright's brother was just as satisfying as killing Wright himself. Maybe even better, because it would cause Wright the same pain Bell had experienced when his own brother died. When the shooting stopped, two young people lay dead in pools of blood. Jimmy West, 23 years old, died at the scene. Tameka Smith, just 18, died on the way to the hospital. Their friend survived only because she had the presence of mind to duck when the shooting started. Bell calmly walked away from the carnage, drove to his aunt's house, and delivered the line that would seal his fate. Theodore got my brother, and now I got his brother. Mission accomplished. Revenge served. Two innocent lives destroyed. Some murder cases take years to solve. Others crack within hours because the killer can't keep his mouth shut. Michael Bell's case fell into the second category. Bell's 6-month campaign of threats against Theodore Wright had created a trail of witnesses that led directly to his door. When police began investigating the bar shooting, they didn't need to look far for suspects. Bell had essentially advertised his intentions to anyone who would listen. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Bell's own family. His aunt, horrified by his confession about killing Wright's brother, contacted authorities and repeated Bell's exact words. In trying to share his triumph, Bell had handed prosecutors their smoking gun, but the evidence went far beyond his confession. Forensic investigators recovered the AK-47 and traced it directly to Bell. Ballistics tests confirmed it was the murder weapon. Multiple witnesses identified Bell from photo lineups. His fingerprints were found at the crime scene. Perhaps most damning was Bell's complete lack of remorse. He made no attempt to hide his involvement, showed no regret for killing two innocent people, and seemed genuinely proud of what he had accomplished. Within days, police had built an airtight case against Michael Bell. His months of planning had been undone by his own arrogance and need to brag about his crimes. The most tragic aspect of the Jimmy West and Tameka Smith murders isn't just that they happened, it's that they were completely preventable. Michael Bell wasn't some unknown quantity who suddenly snapped. He was a career criminal with an extensive history of violence who should have been locked away from society permanently. His rap sheet read like a catalog of escalating brutality, armed robbery, assault, weapons charges, and other serious felonies that painted a clear picture of a man who couldn't be reformed. The system had multiple opportunities to protect the public from Bell, and it failed every single time. Most shocking was the timing of his release from prison, just 7 months before the double murder. If Bell had served his full sentence for armed robbery, West and Smith would still be alive today. This wasn't an oversight or bureaucratic error. This was a systematic failure of the parole system that prioritized Bell's freedom over public safety. The Florida Parole Commission had released a violent habitual offender early, despite clear evidence that he posed a continuing threat to society. Judge R. Hudson Olive was furious about this failure during Bell's sentencing hearing. He didn't mince words about who was responsible for the deaths of two innocent people. His two murders can be laid at the doorstep of the Florida Parole Commission for the irresponsible early prison release of this violent, habitual criminal who should have been in prison at the time the murders were committed, Judge Olive declared from the bench. The judge's anger was justified. Bell represented exactly the type of offender the prison system was designed to contain. A repeat, violent criminal who showed no capacity for rehabilitation. Yet the system had failed in its most basic function, keeping dangerous people away from potential victims. Michael Bell's trial was less about determining guilt than about deciding punishment. The evidence against him was so overwhelming that his defense team never seriously contested his involvement in the murders. Prosecutors methodically presented their case, witness testimony placing Bell at the scene, forensic evidence linking him to the weapon, his own confession to family members, and months of documented threats against Theodore Wright. Each piece of evidence reinforced the same conclusion. Bell had planned and executed a calculated double murder. The defense's only real strategy was to argue against the death penalty, but even that faced insurmountable obstacles. The evidence of premeditation was undeniable. Bell had spent 6 months planning his revenge, obtained an assault weapon specifically for the attack, and carried out a massacre that killed 2 innocent people and endangered countless others. Judge Olive's sentencing remarks captured the calculated nature of Bell's crimes. The jury deliberated and found Bell guilty of first-degree murder for both deaths and recommended the death penalty. Judge Olive accepted their recommendation and sentenced Bell to die for his crimes. But Bell's case revealed another problem with America's justice system: the decades-long delay between sentencing and execution. Bell was sentenced to death in 1995, but it would take 30 years for that sentence to be carried out. During those 3 decades, Bell continued to cost taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars while his victims' families waited for justice. Michael Bell's execution represents more than just the end of one man's life. It symbolizes America's dramatic shift toward capital punishment in 2025. This year has already seen 26 executions nationwide, surpassing all of 2024's total, with months still remaining. Florida alone has carried out 8 executions, matching the state record for a single year, and positioning Governor Ron DeSantis to potentially break that record before Bell's legal team made desperate last-minute attempts to save his life. They filed appeals claiming witness coercion, argued for recantation of testimony, and challenged the constitutionality of Florida's death penalty procedures. The Florida Supreme Court rejected these appeals, citing the overwhelming evidence against Bell. Religious leaders also tried to intervene. Tampa Pentecostal minister Demetrius Minor led a group of 100 Florida Christians in petitioning Governor DeSantis to halt the executions, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. DeSantis had already signed Bell's death warrant in June, setting July 15 as the execution date. As Bell's execution approached, the familiar rituals of death row played out one final time.
Michael Bell died Tuesday for the 1993 murder of 2 people outside the Moncrief Liquors and Lounge. Prosecutors said he used an AK-47 in the attack.
Gunmen fired round after round into this car where Tamika Smith was sitting with 23-year-old Jimmy West.
This is video from our News4Jax archives of that case.
Michael Bell's last day began at 6:30 a.m. on Tuesday, July 15th. For his final meal, he chose simple comfort food: an omelet, bacon, home fries, and orange juice. A modest breakfast for a man facing eternity. As witnesses gathered at Florida State Prison, Bell was given his chance for final words. He said, "Thank you for not letting me spend the rest of my life in prison." No apology, no remorse, just gratitude for his own death. At 6:09 p.m., the curtain rose. revealing Bell strapped to a gurney. 22 witnesses watched as he repeatedly raised his head, looking directly at them through the window. He appeared to speak with corrections officials as the lethal injection began. By 6:12 p.m., Bell had lost consciousness. At 6:24 p.m., a medical worker entered to check for signs of life. Finding none, Michael Bernard Bell was pronounced dead at 6:25 p.m. The families of Jimmy West and Tamekma Smith finally received the justice they had waited 30 years to see. 2 young lives cut short by senseless violence were finally avenged, though no execution could ever truly balance the scales of their loss. Michael Bell's story serves as a stark reminder that some crimes are so heinous, so calculated, and so destructive that only the ultimate punishment can provide justice. His execution marks not just the end of his life, but the closing of a chapter that began with one man's inability to accept that sometimes violence is justified, and his determination to prove that sometimes it isn't. In the end, Bell got exactly what he had given to others: death without mercy, justice without compromise, and a final reckoning that was 32 years in the making. If this expository touched you, please like this video, share, and subscribe to our channel for more videos just like this one.